Hello, good evening to everybody in India and Asia, and good afternoon, our friends in Europe, and very early good morning to our friends in the United States and North America. I am Vijay Kranti. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting subject. This is about the personality of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who has emerged as one of the most outstanding democratic leaders and a spiritual leader of our age, of our times. And today's we will our main focus will be how he has evolved himself and emerged as a leading democratic leader in the world, and how he has moved from a very traditional theocratic orthodox political system and evolved the Tibetan system into one of the most vibrant democracies today. Our The program will be that I initially just give a very short introduction of the two organizing groups, and an introduction to our speakers, and then we'll shift to question answer sessions. All our audience who have some questions to ask, please feel free in the chat box, and our friend Mr. Praful Ketkar, he will pick up those questions and throw at to our panelists, and then we will conclude with a vote of thanks. So today's subject, as I was saying, our focus is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and this event is being organized by the Center for Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement, in short, CHASE, and the Tibetan Youth Congress, TYC. CHASE is a think tank group focused mainly on initiating discussions and exchange of views on important issues related to Himalayan Asia region, and especially on China and you know its colonies also. And Tibetan Youth Congress, as you know all, is the largest socio-political organization of the Tibetan Diaspora, which has emerged as a rallying point of the Tibetan society in exile. And TYC has functioned practically a kind of nursery for the training of at least so far 3 generations, I have noticed, in social and political activities. So now we come to the main issue of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. When China occupied Tibet, they had all contempt for religion and every institution concerned with religion in Tibet, especially Dalai Lama. And despite all their promises of behaving friendly to the Tibetans and the Tibetan government, they went back to all promises, as everybody knows what happened in the history. And then His Holiness the Dalai Lama he was pushed to a situation where he had to flee for his life to exile, and India welcomed him. Since then, he is living in India and heading the government in exile, which has emerged as a very democratized institution. Um, of course, I will leave the rest of things to our speakers who are very well informed. But still, one comment about it's very interesting to notice that the relation between Dalai Lama and Tibetan and the Chinese government started on a very strange, sour note. And initially, Chinese have been branding Dalai Lama and Tibetan Buddhism or religion as an opium of masses, and they branded him all names, right from a wolf in the robe of monks and a gang leader of bandits, whatnot. But over the years, when the things are folding up, now things are just opposite. And today we see that Dalai Lama is he has emerged as a democratic leader, and the institutions around him, the Tibetan institutions, have become an example in democratic functioning. And on the other hand, what we find that the Chinese have taken a just opposite stand. Now they are swearing by religion. They are trying to present, Xi Jinping is trying to present himself as a savior of Tibetan Buddhism more than Dalai Lama and more than any Tibetan. They are even ready to, adopt those all those processes which they used to hate. For example, the finding the reincarnation of spiritual leaders of Tibet. So this is very interesting that there is a role reversal which has happened, that the Dalai Lama from a theocratic leader has emerged a democracy champion, and the government of China and the Communist Party of China has emerged as they are trying to claim as champions of religion. So anyhow, all these details we will leave with our learned speakers. I will start introducing all the three speakers. We have Mr. Buchung Tsering, who is the currently the interim president of International Campaign for Tibet. He himself is a veteran Tibet hand in Washington, D.C., and he has worked in close association for many years with veterans and stalwarts like late Lodi Gary and Hollywood star Richard Gere and a wonderful team of ICT. He started his career as an officer in the Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamsala, and I know him as a journalist, a trained journalist who was working with Indian Express in New Delhi for many years before he joined back CTA. So welcome, Mr. Buchung Tsering. Then we have Dr. Uwe Mea, who is a very well-known personality in Europe. Dr. Uwe Mea, he is by profession, he is a medical doctor, an expert in neurology, and now, of course, he's retired, and he's a passionate Tibet traveler. He knows Tibet almost, like, if I can use the term, like front and back of his hand. He has traveled extensively in Tibet, and he was witness to the uprising in 1988 that happened in Lhasa. So when he saw the atrocities of Chinese with his own eyes, that was the turning point for him when he decided to stand for Tibet. And since then, he has played a very important role. He was the founding member of Tibet Initiative Deutschland, the leading Tibet support group in Germany. And he was its president also for about 3 years. And then he shifted to Switzerland, and now he's functioning as on the board member of the GSTF, which is Friends of Tibet in Switzerland. And he handles media and other issues for them. Then we have a famous Tibetan law practitioner. She's Thinle Chuki. So Thinle Chuki is a very popular lawyer of Tibet. She is an LLM graduate, law graduate from law school of Harvard. Earlier, she was from Mangalore University. She did her LLM here, was a very popular student and one of the most brilliant students that university has produced, with 3 gold medals. And she has been working with CTA, but before that she was working with, because of her background in business laws. So she was the head of South Asia, the South India legal department of Tata Motors, one of the most respected corporate groups in India. But now she is committed to the cause of Tibet and working. And recently, she has been on the human rights and a special appointee on human rights with the Geneva Office of Tibet. And one very interesting thing about her is that she had the privilege of being an interpreter for His Holiness Dalai Lama when he travels in those areas. So welcome to all of you. Then we have Mr. Praful Ketkar, who is a very well-known Indian journalist, a senior Indian journalist and expert on international affairs. Praful Ketkar has been the chief editor of Organiser, a very famous political weekly. And before that, he has been if I say radio activist, he was a radio journalist for many years. and he appears very regularly on the Indian TV, news TV discussion panels. So, welcome, Mr. Praful Ketkar. Mr. Ketkar will handle questions after our three honored speakers have spoken. And then, of course, we are today taking help of Mr. Lobsang Tseten, who is from the Tibetan Action Institute, who is our digital fortress for this event. So, and of course, we have our colleague, young colleague uh, Anjali with us, who is a journalist, and Anjali Mishra. She helps us in handling media related issues. So, welcome, Anjali, and welcome everybody. So, I think I have taken quite a lot of time. So, I leave the floor to Dr. Uwe, who will be speaking about uh, the democratic personality of His Holiness on a very special day when we are celebrating, observing the 32nd anniversary of Nobel Peace Prize to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Dr. Uwe, please.
Just for my security, didn't we have Buchungla first? Or
Oh, sorry. I'm
yeah,
sorry. Yes. Oh, it was just a slip on my part. May I request Mr. Bujung Tsering? I pardon me for this slip. So, Bujungla, please go ahead.
Thank you, Vijay, and greetings to everybody who's here in this panel discussion on the screen, as well as those who are watching it. It gives me pleasure to say some few words on the occasion of His Holiness the Dalai Lama receiving the Nobel Peace Prize and on World Human Rights Day. And thank you, Vijay, for your continued perseverance in the Tibet movement. You have been with us through several decades, and we greatly appreciate it. I want to base my presentation on 4 points. 2 dealing with His Holiness's concept on democracy, and 2 dealing with his impact on Tibetan democracy. I want to lay it out this way because not many people are aware of His Holiness's basic understanding of democracy that he has been trying to share with the world. I think those of us, particularly in the Tibetan movement, have only been able to look at his impact on Tibetan democracy. But I think based on his experience in Tibet, where there were defects in the Tibetan governance system there, his understanding of Buddhist concepts, and his experience gained in the post-1959 period while being a guest of India and being able to travel throughout the world, he has gained experience to appreciate and come out with his own understanding of what democracy would look like. And so therefore, I'll try to cover these grounds. My first point would be that based on His Holiness's own understanding, he has come out with a moral dimension of democracy, which is principle-centered. Now, oftentimes in this world, even in democratic countries, politicians are not very looked at positively. That's because of the experience people have seen about politicians using their power for negative outcomes, which serves their interests. But His Holiness believes that if people can govern the right way, both the leaders and the public can gain from a new understanding of how they should be governed. According to this, he has put great emphasis on transparency being a critical part of democratic governance. Because if decision makers can become transparent in how they decide matters, it will engender trust in the people, and that trust will lead to more confidence in the government of the day, and that will help the democratic system to move forward in a better path. And therefore, His Holiness believes that democracy, even though it has weakness, it's the best guarantor of real freedom and foundation for freedom and democracy. And secondly, within that is the fact that democratic governance has to be based on a positive mental attitude by the leaders. His Holiness has said way back in one of his talks that once you have a genuine sense of concern for others, there's no room for cheating, bullying, or exploitation. Instead, you can be honest, truthful, and transparent in your conduct. This is a very difficult task for politicians, I know, but if governments and government leaders can adopt to this understanding of democracy that His Holiness has, then he believes that the world will be a better place to be in. In this point, one last point I want to make is that His Holiness is also very pragmatic. He says no system of government is perfect, but democracy is closest to the essential human nature. Which brings me to the second point of His Holiness's concept, where he puts people first in real terms, not through lip service, but in real terms. And through his own action, he has shown that time and again that the leader is not important. The governmental institution structure, the buildings are not important, whether it's the type of ruler, whether he or she is king or queen or president or prime minister or chancellor, whatever chairman, whatever it be, they're not important. The important thing is the people. And he says the people are the real ruler, whether it's in India, China, Tibet, or wherever it is. And therefore, that is one of his greatest criticism against the Chinese government, that the Chinese government doesn't place the people first. And this is important even for democracy throughout the world. And if you can, he puts a sort of a Buddhist perspective in how leaders should approach their governance system. He says in Buddhist tradition, there are three styles of compassionate leadership, he calls that. The first is the trailblazer who leads from the front, takes risk, and sets an example. The second is the ferryman who accompanies those in his care and shapes the ups and downs of the crossing. And then the third is the shepherd who sees every one of his folk into safety before himself. So that is the sort of general governance, general democratic understanding of His Holiness that he has been sharing with the world throughout. And I think it's a very appropriate time that we are having this discussion while a democracy summit is being held here in Washington, D.C., and which has made much news in who has been invited and who has not been invited and what it means to democracy throughout the world. I wish some of these thoughts could also be shared with the leaders participating in this democracy summit, because then they will have a better appreciation of His Holiness's thoughts. Coming back to His Holiness's thoughts on democracy as it relates to the Tibetan people, I again have 2 points to share. First is that His Holiness has brought forth a decentralized and institutionalized system of democratic process. Many of us are familiar with what His Holiness has done in the last 1 or 2 decades, nearly 2 decades, in changing the democratic system in Dharamsala, which is at the national level of the Tibetan administration. Today, we have a directly elected leader who is accountable to the people and the parliament. And he has set up the institution such that no matter whether he's there or not, no matter whatever happens, as we just saw last year when we had an election early this year, when we had the election and there was a change in power in Dharamsala. That is just one aspect of Tibetan democracy. What people may not have realized, and I think, Vijay, you know that since you've been to the Tibetan settlement. I come from a Tibetan settlement in Bailakupi, South India. And I know that right since the 60s, His Holiness has encouraged a grassroots form of democracy in the Tibetan settlements throughout the Indian subcontinent, where the settlements are divided into smaller groups called camps, which have elected leaders who govern the affairs of the camps. Even under the camp leaders are what are called the leaders of the 10 groups, who are elected by the people of those 10 houses, and they report to the camp leaders, who in turn report to what is called the cooperative societies, which are democratic process. People elect their cooperative society leaders. They elected the board of directors of the cooperative societies, and they elected the board of directors who are also accountable to the settlement governance overall. This has been happening for the last several decades, nearly now more than 5 decades. And this has made the Tibetan people also understand democratic governance from a very uh, village level, if you will. But our people have not really looked at it as democracy from the way we know it today. Our people have been more focused in what's happening in Dharamsala, which they must. But I think now we could, when we talk about His Holiness and his impact on Tibetan democracy, we should also look at these grassroots development that His Holiness has made possible. And the second point that I want to make is that he also has encouraged the Tibetan people to play by the rules, if you will, to be compassionate leaders, which he has mentioned in democratic terms, and to say that they can have disagreement, but they should not let that disagreement destroy their overall belief, faith in the system. He has told the Tibetan people time and again that you should differentiate between people who govern you, the leaders, and the institution. He said you can criticize the rules, the way the leaders govern, but if you end up criticizing the institution, for example, if you end up criticizing Dharamsala willy-nilly without thinking twice, and then if you lose faith and trust in that leadership, then you are the loser in the long run. Therefore, he has said that it's better for the Tibetan people in exile to have something, an institution that you can depend on, than not to have an institution that can govern you, even though it may not be the most ideal one. So this is what His Holiness has done for the Tibetan people in terms of democratic structure. And if you compare that with what's happening in Tibet, we know for sure that obviously there's no similar democratic freedom that people in Tibet enjoys. Not even that, even the very little space that Tibetans inside Tibet have, even the village level elections the Chinese government is boasting about, in saying when they talk about having democracy in China, it has had little impact on the Tibetan people, because the Chinese Communist Party has made sure that irrespective of what the Tibetan people do, they have always to be mindful of the fact that the party will take them to task if they deviate from the norm which the party has set. So therefore, His Holiness said that the best gift that Tibetans in exile can give to our brethren in Tibet is democracy. And so as I end, I would like to urge our listeners to look at this aspect of Tibetan democracy, and those Tibetans who are watching this. I would also like you to sort of appreciate this, because currently we have a feeling that because of disagreements in the Tibetan democratic society, that our structure has been destroyed. No, it is not that. We should differentiate between the fact that there can be disagreement. Disagreement should be part of our democracy. And with that disagreement, we can sort of strengthen our democratic process. Thank you very much, Vijay.
Thank you, Buchung Seringla. It was exactly what we were expecting, and having known you for so many years, and your understanding of how the Tibetan system functions, how His Holiness has gradually introduced democracy and evolved democratic institutions. So thank you very much for giving us an overall view of the thinking of His Holiness Dalai Lama behind what he has been doing for last 70 years in exile, and what he has, the gift he has given to the people of Tibet. And I very much agree with you, and I hope my other friends also agree with you, that the best gift the Tibetan refugees can give back to Tibet and also to Chinese government is democracy, which they have evolved in a very systematic way. So thank you very much, Buchung Seringla. And now I come to Dr. Uwe. As I said, Dr. Uwe is a number one. He is a very close observer of Tibetan system. He has watched Tibet from inside also and outside. He has been involved with the Tibetan society for many years. He has seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama functioning from a very close distance. And as an observer from outside, a non-Tibetan observer, I'm sure he will enlighten us on how he looks at the system of democracy that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has evolved, or Dalai Lama's personal uh, approach towards democracy. Dr. Uwe Mea, please.
Yes, hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you stay. And thank you, Vijay, for inviting me to this very interesting and important webinar. And also, dear friends and colleagues, I hope I can give you some words from obviously an outsider to the Tibetan community, but I trust that it is really helpful and useful for you to hear what we have to say as Tibet supporters. Now, we have heard already much about the progress of democratization that His Holiness has started in exile with a democratic constitution that was redrafted to a modern version in 1991. And I think that could be a model case for many other countries that guarantees all Tibetans equality before the law, enjoyment of rights and freedom without discrimination, and providing a clear separation of power. This constitution was amended again in 2011 with His Holiness devolving his political authority to the popular elected Tibetan leadership. Now, having worked for the Tibetan cause for more than 30 years, actually I have encountered quite a lot of knowledge gaps on Tibetans in exile and democracy in exile. Many years ago, it started with a very superficial view of a number of that Tibetans were just a number of enlightened subjects that were leading a spiritual life. And I think that prejudice is still promulgated by quite a few travel agencies who have nothing much more to say to Tibet than that it's a mystic country, a spiritual country. There was another prejudice, and it still exists, unfortunately, from Chinese propaganda that the goal of His Holiness and the Tibetan in exile is simply to restore a feudal and theocratic society full of social inequality and injustice. Now, with the award of His Holiness, the Nobel Prize to His Holiness, and an improved and more constant news flow of Chinese atrocities in all Tibetan regions, and also more tourism into Tibet, I think there started to be really growing awareness of serious human rights violations in Tibet among the general public. After several years of violent suppression, this knowledge became much broader, and it amounted to, for example, the Tibet hearing in the German parliament in 1989 that was organized by the late Peter Kelly and Gerd Bastian, and that led to the subsequent founding of Tibet support groups worldwide. But even with a well-established and well-networked community of Tibet supporters and Tibetans in exile, I found the knowledge that actually Tibetans are actively practicing a modern democracy still very scarce. And it is still like that today, so I think we have to consider ways of improving this situation and spread more information about this. Now, when I leave the international level and look at the European level and the national level in Switzerland here, I think there's also little known in the Swiss public about the democratic structures of the Tibetans living in Switzerland. As you will know, in Western countries, there are 4 members of the Tibetan parliament in exile elected here, 2 from Europe and 2 from North America. The 2 members of the parliament from Europe are elected here by the Tibetans living in Europe, and that is not very broadly known. Here in Switzerland, the Tibetan community in exile have a local constitution that was adopted in 1991. The Tibetan community here in Switzerland is amongst the largest worldwide, with more than 6,000 members, so broken down to the overall population of Switzerland. It means that almost 1 in every 1,000 people living in Switzerland is actually of Tibetan origin. Members of the Tibetan community and eligible to elect may be any Tibetan, including children who live in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, whose physical father or physical mother are of Tibetan descent, and they have the right to membership provided they meet certain requirements. The Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein will force this constitution under the jurisdiction of the Municipal Assembly of the Tibetan community. And this has currently 23 national sections, and one of them is the monastic community of the Tibet Institute in Rikon, near Winterthur, near Zurich. The representatives of this regional parliament are elected from each of these sections, where each section contributes 1 or 2 members depending on their size. But even more, there are 3 further associations of Tibetans in Switzerland, which is the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association that I belong to. Then there's the Tibetan Women's Association in Switzerland and the local branch of the Tibetan Youth Congress. And each of them are working under their own democratic charters. We, as the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association, have one of the primary objectives to promote the mutual understanding between the Swiss and Tibetan population in Switzerland. I just wanted to point out that our charter requests that the office of the president and the vice president is always shared between both ethnic groups. So that means if one is president, then the vice president has to come from the other ethnic group. But I wanted to go even further down to local levels in Switzerland. The Tibetans here are not only practicing democracy amongst themselves or within their associations, but they're also participating actively in the democratic institutions in Switzerland. So, for example, one Tibetan is a member of the local parliament of the canton of St. Gallen, representing the Liberal Party, and he also holds an executive function in his hometown Wil, has responsibility for education and sports there. And also another Tibetan has been member of the parliament of the canton of St. Gallen until 2005. I also wanted to mention that the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association facilitated a journey of 5 members of the Swiss parliament to Dharamsala in 2017. The purpose of that journey was to foster an even deeper understanding of the Swiss parliamentarians, of the democratic institutions, of the Tibetans in exile, and them really living democracy in India and elsewhere. During their visit, then, the group met with the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, after that with the Deputy Speaker and members of the Standing Committee, and also with His Holiness himself. And all members of the group agreed that these dialogues really deepened their contexts and understandings. And that should also serve as a motivation for more visits, which I really strongly recommend to consider. So in conclusion, I hope that I have been able to share my experiences and my outside view on this impressive journey towards democracy by the exile community. It hasn't always run smoothly, as we experienced last year with a deadlock of the parliament in exile, but it was resolved. And for me, it is important to really point out that democracy in exile is not only paperwork and not only producing constitutions and charters, but it is really showing that Tibetans are actively living democracy. And this is not only true for practicing it within their own community, but it's also transcending the boundaries of that community. And they have become, and they're becoming active members within Western democracies, as we have seen from Switzerland. So with this, I will end, and thank you for your attention and open to questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Uwe. This is a perspective which even a person like me, who has been so closely associated with Tibetans for, I think this is my 50th year, but you gave a very new perspective, which is quite educating for a person like me also, that the democracy is not a paperwork with the Tibetan society, and the democracy that has been introduced by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, it has transcended to other parts of their life which may not have anything to do with Tibetan elections, Tibetan parliament, but it's going beyond, and how the society, Tibetan society living in Switzerland. You gave example of 23 associations. This is something very unique, which gives a very, I would say, a hopeful perspective to the future of Tibet, because most of us understand that the institutions which Dalai Lama has evolved, the democratic institutions over these years, are not purely for functioning how the refugees should live, how they should handle their affairs, but he has created a system which goes far beyond everything, including his own personal lifespan. And observers like me, I would extend what you have said just now, add a little bit more to the same in direction, that Dalai Lama has, by democratizing the Tibetan system, actually he has given an endless shelf life to the Tibetan struggle. Because now, with an elected parliament, with an elected Sikyong, the people's representative, Tibet is no more depending only on one person, that is, include even His Holiness Dalai Lama. So I think this is a great contribution, and thank you very much for elaborating how the system, democratic system, is functioning within the exile community, especially in Switzerland and Europe. Thank you very much. And now we come to Thinle Chukila. Thinle Chuki, as I said, is a very known legal practitioner of Tibetan community, a young professional. If I can say that in my uh, period of observation, she is a full-fledged second, or rather third generation of refugees who are standing on their own feet and who have now gone beyond what Tibet was known. Tibet was known as sweater sellers, as people with, living within a small, within a small group. And now this community has gone beyond. And you are a representative of the, I would say, the expansion of the Tibetan thought beyond Tibet. So we have Chukila, who has recently filed a legal case against uh, the Olympic International Olympic Committee. I'm sure you will give a short introduction to that in your, when you are making a presentation. Uh, so let us have a perspective of a Tibetan legal practitioner on how, what Tibetan democratic system is, how it is functioning, and surely what are the hopes for future. Uh, Chugila.
Thank you so much, Vijay Krantiji, for the very kind and a very generous introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank, of course, Vijay Krantiji, the Center for Himalayan Asia Studies, and the and Engagement, and the Tibetan Youth Congress for organizing this important webinar celebrating the 32nd anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize conferment to His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama, and for bestowing me with this honor of participating and sharing this panel on the very important topic of democratic Dalai Lama and his contributions to evolution of democracy in the Tibetan community. As we Tibetans celebrate the conferment of Nobel Peace Prize on His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I would like to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to His Holiness for his many benefactions and blessings to to Tibetans and the world. I pray that we be blessed with opportunities to serve His Holiness in every life. My fellow panelists have spoken very eloquently, very much in detail about the evolution and contribution of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to not just the laying of foundations of democracy in the Tibetan community, but also nurturing it over the decades. His Holiness is often known around the world as a messenger of love, peace, compassion, and nonviolence. And for us Tibetans, he's much more than that. For us Tibetans, he is both the Mahatma Gandhi and the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I say this because he has raised the issue of Tibet, the cause of Tibet, the perils of Tibetans under the rule of China, and the struggles of Tibetans within Tibet at the international level. And also he has, as I said earlier, laid the foundations of democracy in the Tibetan exile community, and has over the decades struggled and sacrificed to ensure that the democracy is nurtured and becomes as vibrant and as strong as possible. As Pujun Srila rightly said, he has brought those grassroots level of democratic institutions, and he has nurtured them. And I think it is very important, as he rightly said, that we look at those things. As Vijay Krantiji said, I come from a legal background, so I, in my talk, would like to emphasize on what really forms democracy. In 2004, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution that lays out what are the essential elements of democracy. According to the paragraph 1 of this resolution, and I read, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, inter alia, freedom of association and peaceful assembly and expression and opinion, and the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs directly or through freely chosen representatives, to vote and to be elected at genuine periodic free elections, and etc. So what this resolution in its first paragraphs lays down is that there are basically 7 important elements of democracy. And I would want to emphasize how His Holiness has strived during his lifetime, and who continues to strive to ensure that these democratic institutions are not just nurtured but strengthened over the period of time. So the first element, according to the UN General Assembly's resolution for a democracy, and the most essential one, is separation and balance of power. When we talk about separation and balance of power, as Vijay Krantiji said, that what His Holiness has envisioned over the period of time is that the power does not stay with one person, but is distributed, is separated, and therefore ensuring that the system, that the institutions that have been established transcend his lifetime and are and perpetuate for years to come. And thereby, if you look at how he has devolved his power, prior to this, a lot of power, including legislative power, executive power, and the judicial power, were vested in His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Whereas, as soon as he came to India in exile within 1 year, that is in February 1960, he, during his teachings, said that it is time that we look for ensuring that the legislature is formed and that they are elected by the people. So this, I think, is the first step that he has taken in ensuring that the 3 pillars of democracy, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, are formulated and then are separated, so that the power that he had in himself, he voluntarily gave and bestowed in these 3 institutions. So I think this is very important to note, because we are looking at revolutions, we are looking at so many: spring revolution, autumn revolution, summer revolution, everyone fighting to get the dictators give up their power and to ensure that democracy is established. Whereas you have a leader who already had all those powers but decided to give it away, decided in the benefit and in his long-term vision to ensure that the society, that the system is established and nourished over a period of time. And I think this is a very, very important distinction which sets him apart from many leaders in the history. And therefore, why we say is that he's not just the Mahatma Gandhi for us, but also the B.R. Ambedkar for us, because he also ensured that the constitution of Tibet, which he had envisioned when Tibet becomes free, has now was drafted by him, was promulgated by him. So I think this is a very important distinction to note. And also the second essential element of the democracy, according to the UN resolution, is independence of judiciary. Independence of judiciary, I think this is very important to note. Many of the speakers before me have noted how in the recent times we had difficulties. I think what he did with just one letter of him was to ensure that the judiciary is respected, that the rule of law is upheld. And he, in his letter, clearly says that he is not above the constitution. Whereas he was the one who drafted the constitution. He was the one who held all the powers and gave it away. And yet he has the simplicity and the humbleness and the humility to say that he is not above the constitution, that the rule of law should be respected and be protected, and that the independence of judiciary should be ensured so that the separation of power and also the balance of power is maintained. And again, Pujung Sirina at length spoke about how important it is to ensure that there is transparency and accountability, which again forms another essential element of democracy. I'll talk about only one further important element of democracy, because there are 7 and I wanted to focus on only 4. The last one is about ensuring that the human rights, that the basic fundamental rights of people are respected and protected. And in the constitution, in the charter that is now drafted since the 1991, clearly protects the fundamental rights of the Tibetans. And the charter is an epitome of principles, not just of the fundamental rights, but also deriving principles from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I think these are the major elements of, essential elements of democracy, which His Holiness has not just laid foundations for, but has nourished and nurtured over a period of time. Also, as rightly pointed out by the speakers prior to me, it is a very important juncture where we are, that we have to ensure that what the foundations His Holiness has laid over a period of time needs to be protected and nurtured. And we definitely crossed over successfully one of the major challenges to the democracy and the democratic institutions. It was the sheer belief and faith of the Tibetans that really ensured that there was enough protections and safeguards that could be used and utilized, and everybody came out and spoke for that. And I think that is a very, very important lesson to be learned. And in conclusion, I would like to appeal to all the youngsters, especially Tibetan youngsters, that we have been bestowed with the best gift that was ever possible from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And as an expression of gratitude, the least that we can do is protect what he has granted to us, protect what he has bestowed upon us, and ensure that it continues to sustain, it continues to remain as long as possible. And to all the Tibetan supporters out there, you might have witnessed one of the most difficult challenges to the Tibetan democratic system. But please remember, the Tibetan democracy is very, very young. It still needs nurturing, it still needs the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it still needs the support of all the Tibetan supporters out there. You could have taken up any causes to support, but you picked the cause of Tibet because you believed that the Tibetans need justice, that the Tibetans stand with truth, and you chose Tibetan cause because of that. And as we move ahead at this difficult juncture, I once again implore upon you to please remember why you chose Tibet, and to please continue supporting Tibet and Tibetans during these difficult times. As rightly said before us, today is the International Human Rights Day, and we continue to be one of the most persecuted people in China. In Tibet, Tibet is still considered one of the least free regions in the world. The recent Freedom House Index clearly proves that. And I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama is one of the few Nobel laureates whose dream, whose struggle for ensuring basic freedoms for Tibetans is still unfulfilled, and it is upon us to ensure that we take his message across and beyond. Thank you so much. And just as a conclusion, Vijay Krantiji asked me to speak about the IOC case. This is one case that four Tibet-related civil societies have filed in Switzerland with the national contact point for OECD, Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation and Development, for multinational enterprises. We are challenging the IOC for awarding the 2022 Winter Olympics to China, despite knowing that the human rights violations are rampant there and are being carried out with impunity. So we have filed the case. The NCP has accepted our complaint, and now we are awaiting the decision of whether the mediation can be progressed into or not. Nonetheless, despite whether IOC accepts to come for the mediation or not, I think this is a huge success for all the Tibetans out there to know that there are many, many avenues available to ensure that we restore freedom for Tibetans back in Tibet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chugila. The way you explained the nature of the democracy in Tibetan society and its significance, and especially when you say that in a word where we have innumerable examples of political leaders and powerful people who are ready to grab the powers of people under one or other garb. We have Dalai Lama, who is actually giving up his powers to the people. And that is one thing I think that is the biggest strength of Dalai Lama, is that he gives. He gives, not only he gives power, actually he attains power through that. And that is the reason I think why we find that the most powerful and most arrogant government of the world and most arrogant leader like Xi Jinping, he is so afraid of Dalai Lama. You know, he can shout at the president of America, he can threaten the government of Germany and UK and Australia. He can bully the government of Taiwan, he can shout at the Japan government, and he can say anything. But the moment there is a mention of word Dalai Lama, they start trembling. It's something very interesting to notice that why they are so afraid of Dalai Lama when they are not afraid of anybody. I think the reason is the power of Dalai Lama, the power of his communication, the power of his democratic thinking, and the way he has emerged as a powerful man, because through giving up means giving powers to the people and to the world. So I think this is a very good background for all of us to now shift to the next session. That will be question and answers. And one point which I would like to add before that is that when we analyze why Dalai Lama, what is the difference between a democratic Dalai Lama and Chinese government, I was just sitting and thinking of it, and I was surprised to see that what he has done is he has checkmated, very successfully. He is leader of only 150,000 Tibetans who are spread over 30 plus countries, and in India only 100,000 people. On the strength of these people, he has created a network of so many friends across the world that China is afraid of him. When he gave up his power, uh, you know, his step to give up his political power to an elected representative, I think this was one of the best steps a statesman, and here I say a monk statesman, has taken, that he has checkmated the plans of Chinese to grab the Tibetan institutions, including the Dalai Lama and others. So these are things which have made Dalai Lama quite strong, and his decision to give up powers has given a new strength to the Tibetan society. I mentioned one point that he has given infinite life to the Tibetan people's struggle, but he, by handing over the control of the entire system in the hands of Tibetan people, he has, in a way, created, if I can say, so many Dalai Lamas. For each Tibetan has become a Dalai Lama for Xi Jinping or his colleagues. And one point which impressed me so much is that by giving up powers, his political powers, Dalai Lama has created a situation where whenever it happens, and I hope very soon it happens, that there will be a Tibetan society ready to take up the gift of history whenever the history is offering freedom, or when China comes to break just like Soviet Union, and it is possible, then this Tibetan society will be available to take that opportunity to pick up freedom for themselves. And one more interesting issue which I wanted to underline was that by giving up his powers to the Tibetan elected people, he has also removed a danger which was very imminent, that after the personal life of this Dalai Lama, normally between one Dalai Lama and next Dalai Lama taking over political powers, there is a period of almost 20 years. When the baby is selected, the baby is 3 4 years old, and then he is brought up, educated, and at adulthood he is given the powers. So this was in Tibetan terms it is called bardo, I would say. This 20-year long period of bardo, which would have been very very dangerous for Tibetan in the crisis moment, Dalai Lama has with one stroke removed that. So now, in every given situation, there is an institution, there is a elected set of representatives who are there to take the Tibetan freedom movement ahead. But there are so many other points, and all these points which my friends have brought in gives us a hope that with the approach of Dalai Lama of establishing democracy, nurturing it in its every sense, Dalai Lama has not only strengthened the people of Tibet, actually, he has given a new hope to all those peoples who are fighting for freedom, who are fighting for justice across the world within their systems or against oppressors. So, Dalai Lama has given a new hope to all of them. So, thanking all of you three, now we shift to the question and answer session. So, may I request Mr. Praful Ketkar to please come up with those questions.
Thank you, Vijayji, and uh, my sincere thanks to all the uh, three speakers for uh, making, you know, such a pointed, remarks. I feel that this discussion is important for three reasons. One, of course, is, when today we are celebrating International Human Rights Day, which is also a sort of commemoration of confirmation of the Nobel Prize in 1989 to the His Holiness Dalai Lama. I believe that, what the citation that was given that time, that for advocating peaceful solutions based upon tolerance and mutual respect in order to preserve the historical and cultural heritage of his people. I think that is very important even today, simply because when there is one authoritarian regime which is hell-bent on finishing the entire historical and cultural heritage of one community, that spirit of keeping this struggle alive with a peaceful manner and with the sense of tolerance and mutual respect, I think is a very important thing. But more important than that, I feel, and I have a, a question on this to uh, Mr. Buchung Seringla. Uh, uh, there is a debate now about the democracy. There is one democracy, summit that is taking place in Washington. There is another democratic summit for democracy that is happening in Beijing, and they are calling, a new term was coined, that whole process democracy. And in a way, it is challenging the Western model of democracy, the representative democracy, the liberal democracy, what is generally called. Now, you already talked about the moral dimensions of democracy, the people centric democracy, and the transparency being the cardinal principle of that democracy. How do you think that this, a swift but meaningful transformation of a personality centric democratic model of Tibetan administration to representation centric, how it is different from these two models, and how far Tibetan society, I believe that traditional societies have different models of democracy existing for from time immemorial. In India also, for example, in different Hindu sects or even Buddhist traditions, there were different ways of managing democracy. So how it is different from the so-called whole process democracy of China, which is nothing but one party dictatorship. On the other hand, the liberal democracy of the US, which is mainly based on the lobbying and the pressure groups of different classes. So how do you see this, and how would you like to present this model as an alternate or third way, I would say, third way of democracy to the world?
Thank you, Praful. I think in answer to your question, basically what His Holiness the Dalai Lama is sharing about democracy is how, if you really want to understand the objectives of democracy, these characteristics need to be there. It doesn't matter whether it's that Chinese form of democracy or the Western form of democracy or a proletarian democracy, whatever it is. That's a subjective interpretation. But at the end of the bottom line is, why do you have governance? Why do you have democratic governance? Fundamentally, it's to bring happiness to the people. It's to bring self-reliance to the people. It's to make people confident, and if make people believe in each other and believe in the state in which they live. So which one can provide that best is something that we can then look at the current Chinese utterance. I know they have been making this case about, for example, why democracy shouldn't be universal, that it has to be dependent on the cultural characteristics of the society. But if you look at transparency, if we look at honesty, if we look at the moral dimension that I mentioned earlier, they don't need to be connected to a particular culture. Honesty is as much relevant in India, in the Tibetan society, as much as it is in Washington, D.C. or in Beijing. So therefore, I think the Chinese have a tough time trying to explain themselves. The whole reason why, for example, the Chinese, as also the Russians, have been criticizing the Democracy Summit here. Although Democracy Summit, and I look through their documents, they don't really touch on China in that very substantive way. But they realize that this is an alternative form. It's a form of governance that which, if the Chinese people really understand, they would want that. And that the Chinese government is afraid that it will dismantle the system that they have provided. And therefore, they're trying to counteract that by trying to bring in others along with them. It's similar to the previous, or in fact, it's continuing the Chinese policy of trying to bring in what they call the developing societies behind them, with the hope that then they can lead them to attack the Western society. So I don't put much value in the Chinese usage of terms, because ultimately their action should speak, whether it's in Tibet or in China. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a couple of more questions, and anybody from the panel can take it on our YouTube channel. There is one. Mr. Hasmukh Devnani said, "Excellent message to all current and future politicians as to their conduct must be clean, honest, and transparent." He thinks that this is the message from His Holiness, democratization process in the Tibetan community. But there are a couple of questions by Mr. Kiran. He asked, could you elaborate the point regarding disagreement between whom? I think it's for Buchungji. And there is another question by him. How do the Tibetans in exile plan to regain their homeland, and upon reaching that objective, reconcile with those who endured the harsh rule of the Chinese? So I think that's a very futuristic question, but still important for him. So one question is clearly he has identified for Buchungla, because he mentioned about the managing disagreement. And there is one question about how do the Tibetans in exile plan to regain their homeland and reconcile with the population there who have, endured with the harsh rule of Chinese, means rule from the Beijing.
Thank you. I mentioned this issue about disagreement because many of the listeners might be people, either Tibetans or who have understanding of the Tibetan society in exile. And what has developed in the last several years after we have had this elected form of leadership in Dharamsala is the fact that when there are elections, they're bound to be candidates. When they are candidates, it would why to be the one to be selected by the people, and accordingly they'll put for their ideas and they'll criticize the other side's ideas. And that has been witnessed in Tibetan society. However, because our society is small, these disagreements become enlarged, and often that they become personalized. A bigger society like India can take it. Every day you see people criticizing the prime ministers like anything, but Indian society can take it. But within our society, because it's small and people know each other almost literally, these disagreements are seen as being indications of disunity in the society. That's what I'm saying about. We can be united even with the disagreement. That we need to understand. On the other issue of the resolution of the Tibetan issue, I think for today's context, it might suffice just to say that Dharamsala and the Tibetan leadership in exile is looking for a middle way approach to resolving the issue through dialogue with the Chinese leadership. And there are voices, because we're talking about democracy, there are voices within the Tibetan community that say we should strive for independence too. But the official policy is the middle way approach. Thank you.
Would you like to take it, Ms. Chukila? Would you like to? Yeah, the question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So as Pujun Srila rightly said, one thing is about managing disagreements. The other thing is about going very personal, and this is not. The reason why I often say His Holiness has been visionary is because he had anticipated these things. He knew that the minute there is a establishment of a democratic system, he knew that there needs to be checks and balances and also protection. And one of the first thing that he did right after coming into exile, after announcing that we have to go democratic in our way of governance, was starting the first Tibetan nursery school on 3rd March 1960. And the reason why I say this is because it is very well known that the best form or the best way to protect a democracy would be by educating its masses. And His Holiness knew that if he proposes the way forward as democratic system of governance, it needs to have protection. And the way forward that he envisioned was educating the Tibetans, not just with the modern technology, but also modern thoughts and ideas. So again, managing disagreements, yes, of course, but also ensuring that when we criticize people, we come from a very educated understanding and well-informed understanding, and not just dilly-dallying about what a person does in his personal life, and about what we are doing to go back to homeland. Uh, as rightly noted again, there are various uh, ideas and principles and thought process that have been proposed over a period of time, but His Holiness, from his Strasbourg proposal, has clearly noted that the best way forward would be the middle way approach, because that not just ensures that a peaceful resolution is gained for the Tibetan issue, but also that there is a non-violent approach towards the entire resolution of uh, the issue of Tibet. And I think that is a very, very important one. And it is the policy that has been adopted and supported by the Tibetans in exile, and adopted by the Tibetan parliament in exile as well. So it is the principal path approach that has been being adopted and implemented by the Central Tibetan administration.
May I add one point, Prafulji?
Yeah, please, please.
This issue came up because for last few months there was a stalemate going on in the Tibetan parliament. There was a dispute between some parliamentarians and the judiciary, and there was a debate on the different methods of taking oath, which resulted into a stalemate, which luckily has been solved. There were I faced this question from some Tibetan friends and others also. And my answer to this is that let us not start believing that if His Holiness Dalai Lama has given a constitution or a democratic system to the Tibetans, so that is the end of the game. Actually, democracy is an evolving process. It is like an organic growth, and it keeps on growing. And my example for this is the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution is, I think, the largest, bulkiest constitution in the world. When it was made, a large group of very intelligent, very committed, dedicated people put their heads together and came up with this constitution. And it was thought that, oh, this is the last word now. And when you see, you go to record, I have lost the count after 120. There have been more than 120 amendments to the same constitution. And there have been tremendous debate on bringing these changes. And still, we have gone through, Indian constitution has gone through so many changes over these years. So if a constitution which has been a result of such a long process, so many people, and a long history of freedom struggle, if it is not perfect, there is no need of expecting that the constitution which is now functioning with Tibetan society has to be perfect. No need of it. Actually, it shows the life of the system. It shows the strength of the system, that there is a difference of opinion. There are people who think there is a better way. And that, I think, is a good reason for hope. And if any Tibetan or any friend of Tibet is disappointed or unhappy that there is a debate going on in Tibetan parliament or in Tibetan circles, they don't need to worry. It only shows the health of democracy among Tibetans. And finally, we saw, although the stalemate went on for a few months, but there is a solution. And now they will, I'm sure, very soon they will go into the constitution, make those amendments which ended up in this stalemate, and maybe next time we will have one less problem. So I don't think there is any reason to be worried about it or managing disagreement. I think disagreement brings in the best in you, and it comes out with better options than we had before the disappointment started or disagreement started.
Thank you, Vijayji. There is one more question in the chat box, uh, which says the element of democracy is lacking in the Chinese administration. Is it wrong to say that the Tibetan struggle for democracy can also be an inspiration for native Chinese, where their own lifestyles have been greatly affected by China's communist approach? So, this is a interesting thing. On the one hand, there was a question about how Tibetans are, planning to go back to their homeland, and now how far Tibetan struggle can impact the Chinese people to claim their democratic rights. Any thoughts on this?
Maybe I can say a word from the outside again.
Yeah.
So what I see is, first of all, of course, everything has to evade the Chinese censorship. So China tries to exclude and seclude the country and from not reaching news to the people inside. It is also the case that I think that the picture of Tibetan democracy in exile and how it is lived actively, it is not meeting an understanding of Chinese within China on democracy. I think it is rather that Chinese leadership is now attempting to erase Tibet from the landscape. So they are not arguing against anything, but they are trying to just make Tibet go away. To remind ourselves, the Communist Party a few weeks ago decided to no longer use the word Tibet, but to replace it with Xinjiang. So that is one thing where Tibetans are disappearing. The other is that we have to be cautious about our own language in discussing it with China. We recently had a visit in Switzerland from the well-known human rights lawyer Michael van Walt from Prague, who reminded us that the occupation of Tibet was illegal. And then if we start using the same language and speaking about minorities, it is already wrong. So you make a people minority if you illegally invade that country. And now also that Western media here are very often using the expression of a region in southwest of China. So if something happens, and we have to fight against this propaganda and wording. Yeah, so that is the first thing before we can reach anyone inside of China. It is not arguing against a certain perception or picture. It is arguing against the attempt to erase Tibet from the world.
Any thoughts, Chukila, from your side?
Yeah,
How far
yeah, just
Chinese?
to say that, yeah. I don't know about inside China because the Chinese community is so large inside China that it's difficult to say what they might get. But I know from my little experience with the Chinese democracy movement in exile, they look at the Tibetan way of democratic leadership as a model because they are disunited more than what we can think of, even though they have the common enemy of the Chinese Communist Party there in Beijing. Within the Chinese democracy leadership, they've always been plagued with this inability to come together. So we have many of these different organizations going along their different ways, and they look to the Tibetans who, even though in terms of numbers and in terms of other resources may be less privileged than them, are better able to handle our own governance system.
Yes. What is happening inside Tibet has always inspired many mainland Chinese. One very concrete example would be In the 1980s, there were many uprisings in Tibet. The Lhasa uprising of 1987, where monks, Sera monks, came out on the road protesting against the illegal rule of China, and they called for freedom for Tibetans. And very interestingly, what China did, and it was one of those silly mistakes which was intended otherwise. So what China did was they recorded all those brutal beatings of the Tibetans by the police. They recorded the videos, and then they broadcasted in mainland China, basically to show that in case you protest against Chinese rule, they will sort of, like crush you down. And also to show that, oh, Tibetans are so ungrateful that they are fighting against the many benefits provided by China to Tibetans. But what counter effect it had was that many Chinese looked at those videos and found strength in raising their voice against the PRC. And in fact, this was also one of the major motivations for the Tiananmen Square, the very famous uprising of China in 1989, where the Chinese government brutally crushed hundreds and thousands of Chinese students, right? So Tibetans, through their devotion for the cause, through their fight for the freedom, for basic fundamental rights, have always inspired the mainland Chinese. However, the Chinese media and the propaganda mechanisms that China is using is trying to paint Tibetans as, first of all, lazy, economically not cooperative, and also ungrateful. And therefore, they're trying to paint the Tibetans as these people who live in the mountains and have no gratitude for the motherland. Whereas the reality is different. And therefore, with the censorship, as Dr. Uvela correctly mentioned, the amount of awareness of what is happening inside Tibet is very limited to the mainland Chinese, and far more limited for the Tibetans outside in exile. And what Tibet has been often called is that it is worse than North Korea to enter, even for the journalists. And with few journalists, including Vijay Krantiji, who went there, have consistently reported about the atrocities that the Tibetans have faced. And one of the articles that I really loved, which Vijay Krantiji had written, was about how the Panchen Lama, the Panchen Lama appointed by the Chinese are less popular. His pictures are less popular in the streets of Lhasa than the pictures of Shah Rukh Khan, because the actual Panchen Lama, the one recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, has been under enforced disappearance for over 30 years now. And China has imposed its own Panchen Lama on the Tibetans, and the Tibetans are not able to accept that. So when Vijay Krantiji wrote that article, it really brought tears to my eyes that he understands what's happening inside Tibet and he's able to report it outside, which is not very common. So yes, we inspire the mainland Chinese, but the problem is the lack of information that is coming out of Tibet, and therefore the horrid picture that is being painted about Tibetans in China. I think that needs to be fought against.
One thing I want to add here, thank you very much for what you said about my writing. My opinion on this issue, whether Tibetans today succeed or appear to be succeeding or not today in their struggle against China, in the context that China is one of the has mightiest army, has the mightiest economic power, and has the attitude to arm twist any country. I think the Tibetans, the best thing they can do is they continue their struggle, they continue their determination and their unity and their organization. In his history is a road roller. It doesn't walk the way we want. It walks on its own way. None of us had ever imagined that Bangladesh would suddenly emerge as a nation. that Soviet Union, one of the biggest powers, will suddenly one day evaporate, and you will have 16 new countries out of it. But those countries maintained their vision, maintained their desire for freedom. So when the history, this road roller arrives, it will ask who is there uh, to take back their freedom. So I think the Tibetans should preserve their identity, their determination, their unity for that day. And when that day comes, they should be available for to take back freedom of their country. And don't worry, it can come anytime. And to me it appears Xi Jinping is only fastening that process by becoming so arrogant, by picking up fight with every country, and attacking every country, coming out with the Wuhan virus, and inflicting the whole world. Xi Jinping and China are creating that system and accelerating that process. So I, as a friend, would advise Tibetans, just maintain your, freedom struggle. Be present on that day when history will ask you, yes, who wants freedom, and you are there. So be there on that day.
Thank you, Vijayji, for those additions. Now, I would come to the before we close and go for the formal thanks. I would like to raise 2 points that are already there in our chat box. One is for uh, Dr. Uwemea. Sir, you have interacted with these, various groups having their own democratic charters. How far this spirit of, the moral dimension of democracy and transparency has been percolated? Because having that vision at the leadership level is one thing, and otherwise there is a tendency for this group to be turning into another pressure group, lobbyists like in the American system typically. So how far they understand this the moral dimension of democracy, and how far these groups are really absorbing what the His Holiness is really trying to establish as far as democratic tradition is concerned.
Well, I can say, I mean, we and I myself are interacting with these groups more than once weekly. I mean, sometimes we're interacting daily. The IOC action was a joint activity of all groups. We have an active parliamentary group for Tibet in the Swiss Parliament, which we just visited 2 days ago. And again, it was a delegation composed of more than one Tibet association. That means we are really dealing with each other day by day. We are launching media statements quite regularly now in the context of that. And each time I see prompt response, I see active collaboration. So I do not see any of these associations disappearing in silos or becoming self-complacent. But I see them open to discussion, also open to criticism, also open to controversial debate. So again, I see that this principle of democracy, of mutual respect, of respecting the majority, and then carrying decisions forward, even if you yourself have voted against it. I see that happening day by day. I do not have concerns that this is going to disappear.
Thank you. Chukila, I will give a last word to you. I think you have summarized what the His Holiness is for Tibetans. Like when you said he is Mahatma Gandhi as well as Baba Sahib Ambedkar simultaneously for you. Uh, uh, I have, this question that has come up. You spoke about the uh, elements of democracy, transparency, accountability, and the way one spiritual leadership in a way which is perceived to be a theocratic leadership, has brought in the real political democracy. How does the younger generation of Tibetans accept this? Because many a times, as I asked with Dr. Maya also, it is uh, the superior leadership can have a vision for it, but even the people, and especially the next generation, who may not carry the same kind of reverence for the leadership, may find it difficult to absorb. So how do you see this vision and these values are being nurtured in the next generation of Tibetan community?
Yes, I think that's a very, very important question, and which I have personally seen how Tibetans, the younger generations, like myself, even though I have a bit of gray hair, are looking at His Holiness's contributions. When we look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, of course, he is a spiritual leader for us. But when we look at the contributions that he has made, where the current generations has this concept of YOLO, you only live once, and he had all the reasons to say that I only live once and therefore let me live as I want. Instead, he took up that responsibility at the tender age of 16, where we were barely figuring out how to even write few letters here and there. He took up the responsibility of 6 lakh Tibetans, and he has throughout his life
6 million.
ensured 6 million. I'm sorry, thank you for correcting me. 6 million. I get confused with the lakhs and the millions often. My apologies. 6 million Tibetans, and he ensured that he sacrificed his personal, at times, personal work and life to ensure that the Tibetans are protected, the Tibetans in exile are protected, and the cause and the culture and the language is not left behind. And speaking from a personal experience, I never went to a Tibetan school. I went to all Indian schools. And the reason why my father made me the experiment child was that His Holiness, throughout his speeches, whenever he came down to South, often told people that you have lived here in India for so long. You should learn the community. You should mingle with the community. You should collaborate with the community and local community, when I say community. And my father decided that yes, she will be the one who will go and learn the local traditions of the community and collaborate with them. And I became the experiment child. And even though I never had Tibetan friends while I was growing, even though I never had Tibetan classmates, I was always brought up with the values, with the principles, with the importance of compassion and love, and importance of knowing that all human beings are same at the basic level. So I grew up celebrating Ramzan uh, and Deepavali and Ganesh Chaturthi and Losar together. And when I was often this is coming from the fact that Pujun Sirinla said that there's very significant need for people to distinguish between leaders and the institution. When I was around 13, 14, I was refused admission at a Tibetan school. And for a 13, 14-year-old girl, that was devastating to see my father being humiliated. And I went home crying. And when he saw me crying, the one thing that he said, and please mind, he has never been to a formal school. He's never been educated in the modern education terms. He said, please remember, whenever you are down, whenever you feel hopeless, whenever you feel demotivated, remember that you should know that the person that you met does not represent the institution. The person is the person who made that decision. Do not have hard feelings for the Tibetan community or the Tibetan institutions. And remember the sacrifices His Holiness has made for us, for the better education of this generation and the generations to come. And therefore, find that one reason to continue to serve the Tibetan community and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I think that has kept me going throughout these 30 odd years where I have seen many ups and downs, where I felt so hopeless, so demotivated, but I've always remembered finding that one reason of the sacrifices that His Holiness has made for us, and that we have to ensure that we bring some sort of relief and some sort of basic freedoms for Tibetans back in Tibet. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is really wonderful having all of you here as we, as commemorating 32nd anniversary of the conferment of the Nobel Prize on His Holiness Dalai Lama. I just wish that this spirit of real democracy, the spiritual strength, the political strength, the people-centric approach, the decentralized approach, and the moral dimensions of this democracy actually presents as the alternative, the real alternative to the entire world. And may the His Holiness keep guiding us on this path, not just to the Tibetan community but to the entire humanity in the coming future. With these words, I will close the discussion part here, and over to you, Vijayji, for the final word.
Okay. So now I think it is time to say thanks to everybody who contributed to it. May I request our friend Sonam Tseringla, who is the General Secretary of Tibetan Youth Congress and co-host of this event, to please present a vote of thanks.
First of all, I would like to extend my sincere apologies for my late entrance due to the Bangalore traffic. I went to see of our bikers who have started a campaign, a bike ride campaign to boycott the Beijing Winter Olympic. So I get a little late. I extend my sincere apologies. And I, on behalf of Tibetan Youth Congress and the chairs, extend our greetings and gratitude to all the panelists and the our audience who are taking part in the live stream on this auspicious occasion of the 32nd anniversary of conferment of Nobel Peace Prize to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So with this, we came to the end of this webinar, and I want, without thanking the panelists, this webinar won't be a success. So I want to thank, first of all, I would like to thank Puchunla for putting your for enlightening the audience on the topic. And Puchunla is also a former TYC Centrex member who has served in TYC Centrex during the term of, with same term of former CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singela. Thank you, Puchunla Tujiche. And next, I would like to thank Dr. Uwela for taking part in this important webinar and for always supporting in Tibetan campaign works back in Switzerland. And we will continue to seek your support and guidance in our near freedom struggle. So thank you, Dr. Ovila. And next, I want to thank Tlen Kukila for taking part in this important program, and then also for putting out different perspectives and contributing with your intellectual capacity, not only in this webinar, but also actively engaging in the Tibetan freedom struggle. So thank you, Tlen Chujila. And next, I would like to thank Vijayji, current chairman of the Chase and co-host of this program, who has been very active in Tibetan freedom struggle. And Vijayji is a long supporter of Tibet cause and a strong supporter of Rangzen independence. And he is a good friend of TYC for several decades. And thank you, Vijayji, for always coming up with new topics for the discussions and webinars. Thank you, Vijayji. Next, I would like to thank journalist and a good friend of Tibet, Praful Ketkar, for taking part in this webinar for the first time. and also for handling the question and answer session and putting some more cautions to make this webinar more success and more wide to engage with the wider perspective. Thank you. And also I would like to thank Angela Mishra, who is also with us, and she is taking care of the media section and supporting Vijay in wrapping up the reports and making it possible to spread in the wider media section. Thank you, Anjali Mishra ji. And next, I would like to thank Tibet Institute, Action Institute staff, especially Lobsang La today, for making us possible to stream it in the different social media section and for always assisting us in the technical part. Thank you. And with this, I once thank everyone who are taking part in this webinar and making it a success. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. And it was really wonderful interaction. And I hope very soon we'll come out with yet another subject which is very relevant to the issue of Tibet, to democracy, and to understanding China in a better way. So thank you, everybody. We meet again very soon. Namaskar.
Namaste.
Thank you. Tujie che puchunla